I think it might be a bit too early to answer this question, but what is definitely new is that Israel's image as a security and as a military power in the region has been completely shattered. Because despite its significant military advantages, its superior technology and weaponry, its 24/7 surveillance of the Gaza Strip, and despite the fact that it controls the flow of goods and people in and out of the confined Gaza Strip, Israel was still very surprised and taken aback by the attack launched by Hamas on the 7th of October. So the attack was a major military and intelligence failure for Israel. And the fact that the US sent aircraft carriers to Israel conveyed a lack of confidence, in my opinion, that Israel could succeed on its own. And at the same time, Hamas fighters employed new weaponry and tactics in a successful way. And this was astonishing to everyone because all these developments took place while the Gaza Strip has been under an Israeli imposed land, sea, and air blockade for the past 16 years. And all these developments went unnoticed by Israeli forces. So what's new is that Israel's supremacy and the power dynamics that have so far existed were clearly challenged by the attack. But one factor that makes the future difficult to predict is that Israel does not have a clear strategic goal at the moment, besides revenge and exacting a heavy price from Palestinians. They say that they want to do a ground invasion, but what happens to Gaza next? Do they reoccupy Gaza? Do they depopulate the 2.3 million citizens who live there? It's not clear. And frankly, also Hamas doesn't seem to have a clear end game. They talked about prisoners exchange, other individual issues, but a clear strategic objective is still lacking. Now, if this evolves to a regional war involving Hezbollah and Iran, then this would mark a critical juncture, and we might be heading towards a new chapter in the MENA region, marked by a protracted war. But I don't think there's an interest from the US, especially in the conflict escalating to a regional one. But ultimately, I hope we enter a new moment in the Middle East, whereby both Israel and the international community acknowledge that there is no military solution, because violence will only beget more violence, perpetuating the current cycle of bloodshed. And so this happens when they acknowledge that the main problem is actually a political one. Since 1993 and the signing of the Oslo Accords, the main model adopted by the Palestinian Authority and advocated by the international community was centered around the so-called peace process. However, this model has miserably failed and proved to be a great illusion, because during the past 30 years, Israel has only entrenched its settler colonial enterprise by expanding illegal settlements, fragmenting Palestinian space, and creating more facts on the ground that makes a two-state solution impossible. And so what the Oslo process did was that it institutionalized the power imbalance between Palestinians and Israelis. And it also proved to be a great illusion because it has been less about peace and more about keeping alive the process that would enable Israel to buy more time and cement its colonization. And this, in turn, led to the growing disgruntlement of Palestinians and to a sense of abandonment, both from the regional and the international community, because they ended up with nothing. Now, the attack that was launched by Hamas came partially in response to this status quo and mainly sought to challenge it. And in my opinion, it achieved two things. The first is that it reasserted the centrality of the Palestinian cause. We've seen Arab normalization agreements being signed with Israel with no regard to Palestinian rights or even to the Arab Peace Initiative. And the latest attempt at normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel was also based on largely ignoring Palestinians' political demands and their rights. So the current war was a reminder to the region and to the international community that the Palestinian cause cannot be sidelined or ignored as it has been the case. The second, I think, thing is that the attack largely shattered Israel's popular image worldwide as a military power and as having the invincible army. And this has important ramifications, of course. For a long time, Israel has sought to use Gaza, essentially the blockade and the policies of collective punishment, to threaten Palestinians in the West Bank by saying, if you resist the occupation, your destiny will be like Gaza. And one of the major things happening in Gaza in the present is that Israel is trying to commit a second Nakba. For example, they ordered more than 1.1 million Palestinians who live in northern Gaza to flee their homes in 24 hours before Israel undertakes a ground invasion. We heard from Israeli officers like former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon, who clearly stated that the Israeli plan was to force Palestinians into the Sinai Desert to live in tent cities. And you have a member of the Knesset, of the Israeli parliament, who even explicitly invoked the Nakba, or the ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948, by saying that Israel has one goal, and I'm quoting him here, a Nakba that will overshadow the Nakba of 1948. End of quote. So this is what's happening in Gaza. However, I think it's very unlikely for Israel to enforce a population transfer on Palestinians in the West Bank to Jordan if an uprising erupts in the West Bank. And one reason, among other reasons, is that any population transfer to Jordan would further challenge the demographic reality in Jordan and might be very destabilizing to the Hashemite regime. And we know that Jordan is a strategic ally of the US. The two countries have a strong partnership. So I don't think the US would support any measure that could destabilize the Jordanian regime, because it's not in the US or even in Israel's interests to do so, especially in the present.